Seems like the certified lover boy is in some certified deep trouble. The XXXTentacion trial has been going on for a long time, but it seems like they found one of the culprits, and it's none other than Drake. The defense attorney for the trial, Mauricio Padilla, pulled out some evidence in front of the court and said that since the two were rivals, he could be connected to the rapper's death. One of the three people who actually murdered XXX came up to the court and said that several people were there at the time of the murder. This surprising list of potential witnesses included Tekashi 6ix9ine, Takeoff, Offset, and of course, Drake. I think this was probably a strategy to delay the trial further because none of these big names would have actually shown up, and that's exactly what happened. Drake was supposed to come to court on January 27th, but he didn't. So the judge gave him an extension till February 24th to show up, and to make it easier for him, it's all done online on Zoom. So if he really has nothing to hide, all he has to do is come and talk for like 10 minutes. Everybody knows how unlikely it is that Drake, of all people, is involved. His real name is Aubrey. He doesn't have a single gangster bone in his body. But if he doesn't show up, he could be charged with contempt. But why do they think it's Drake of all people? Don't worry, it's not actually much evidence they're going on. The defense attorney said that since the two had always had a feud, one that began after Drake ripped off one of XXX's songs, but this is bad, guys. Everybody knows Drake is a softie. All he needs to complete his gangsta image is a murder conviction. But it's okay. He probably won't be getting that anytime soon, because the only actual evidence XXX's defenses brought up was how 4 months before his death, XXXTentacion posted on his Instagram story and said that if he was ever murdered, everybody should find Champagne Poppy, which is Drake's IG handle.
Before X died, he said, if anybody kills me, it's Drake. He came on social media and said, guys, before he dies, if anybody kills me, it's Drake. Do you think sitting here today, years later, any detective has ever asked, Drake or anybody like that? No, they never did that. If any of us is involved in, God forbid, in a murder, and you say, hey, it's so-and-so, you better believe so-and-so is going to get investigated. But in this case, they didn't do it.
But then the story was deleted, and he even apologized and said his account was hacked. So it was most probably some fan obsessed with the drama between the two. But still, screenshots of the story went viral, and it was such a big thing that his defense attorney is risking the entire case on it. It's a huge reach and a completely wild theory, but could it actually be true? Not gonna lie, I'm a bit worried that it might be. Since Drake refuses to appear in court, he could show up just to pay his respects, especially after the rapper died in such a gruesome way. He had just gone to an ATM and taken out a lot of cash. Then he went to a motorcycle shop close by where he was looking at bikes. But when he came out, he was robbed. They got away with the money, and he was shot in the neck when he tried to struggle. One of the robbers, Robert Allen, testified and told the courts everything. He said he was with Dedrick Williams, Michael Boatwright, and Trayvon Newsom.
Unarmed, in the driver's seat, surprised by the two gunmen in this case. You'll hear how they start struggling with him, punching him, and that both of the gunmen at one point are trying to get his property from him, the satchel that had the $50,000 in cash.
They had all come up with a plan to rob people the next day, and they were just buying masks for all of them when they stopped next to the motorbike store. And that's when they ran into XXXTentacion's car and immediately recognized him inside the shop. Then they stayed outside and came up with a plan to rob him. And at the time, Allen said he tried telling everyone that it was a bad idea, and there were surveillance cameras everywhere, and it could go sideways really quickly. But the rest of his gang didn't listen, and obviously, things didn't go as planned.
And without any provocation, without any type of weapons or anything being used by the victim, you'll hear how Michael Boatwright fires several times, killing the victim at close range. You'll also be able to see the surveillance that shows this.
Now they're all facing life in prison if convicted, but still the police believe that it was a targeted killing since they recognized his car. Even XXX's sister, Ariana Onfroy, said it was definitely planned and that someone in the rapper's close friends wanted him gone.
It definitely was an inside job because of how calculated the whole thing was.
The murderers knew exactly when and where to hit him, and they were gone before he dropped to the ground. Just like that, a cultural icon was wiped out. His death had a huge impact on the world, but so did his life. He was definitely very troubled. Just in the past year, he had been charged with assaulting his pregnant girlfriend. He was banned from Spotify. His record label dropped him, and his album reached the #1 on Billboard charts. He lived a fast-paced life and seemed like he was just trying to outrun his past, and that reflected in his music, which is why he became so popular. His music was a mix of hip-hop and emo, and he was probably one of the first ones to break onto that scene. But his life could be summed up as one that showed the faults of the society he lived in. He was disconnected from reality and committed the most violent crimes, like how he admitted to stabbing 9 people, and the obscene use of drugs in his life hadn't helped his development as a healthy adult. He had been arrested several times by the police because of how violent he was. But at some level, he recognized all of that. He didn't take out that violence on gangs and rivals. His victims were just vulnerable people around him. His music never glorified the machoism of the gang life. Instead, he would always talk about his traumatic childhood, mental illness, suicide, and a numbness with the world. His behavior reflected how he had been treated. When he was growing up, his bond with his mom was pretty strong, as long as she was around, which wasn't very often. At times, she just didn't want him around and would move him from home to home. By his teens, he was already in trouble for using guns and bringing drugs into his school. He did some time in juvie where he just showed his excellence at violence. He beat his cellmate within an inch of his life because apparently he looked gay. But one of the biggest reasons for his behavior was probably the use of Xanax. It's an addictive pharmaceutical drug used to treat anxiety, which started becoming extremely popular amongst teens because of how easy it was to get. It helps to numb internal pain, but all it did was create a complete disconnection from reality, because you can't numb internal pain until you deal with what's bothering you. But after he was put in prison for beating his girlfriend and making her go through a miscarriage, he was launched into the spotlight and became extremely famous. Rappers like A$AP Rocky would hype him up, and even Kendrick Lamar said he couldn't wait for his new album. After XXX died, Kanye tweeted and wrote a heartfelt message saying how much he inspired him. But this was all really concerning, because like other artists who became famous and then allegations about their behavior came out, XXXTentacion became famous for the way he treated women. Internet subreddits became dedicated to the hatred he had for women, and overnight he became a troubling icon for troubled young men. And he liked this image of his. He would try to soften his image, but then would do things like tweeting support for Dylan Roof, the school shooter, just solidifying his image as an edgelord. But his life was one lived hard and fast, and eventually the trauma he faced caught up with him. That's all for today. We'll see you in the next video.